So good evening, everyone. I hope that you are all doing well. I'm Mohammed Zainal, the acting dean at the College of Business Administration. I'm glad to see you all again, and I welcome those of you who were not with us on Tuesday. Here is a quick recap to our last session. We all agree that the spread of this pandemic, COVID-19, took us by surprise, and that made online learning to be the only solution to continue learning. Responding to which, we are conducting our second webinar today. This virtual gathering is brought to you in collaboration with Northeastern University, aiming to enhance remote learning and making it a success by using the right tools and methods. As a continuation of CBA's effort in supporting our colleagues at the college level and other faculties across entire Kuwait University to make the online transition even smoother by taking key points from the experts who have been in the business for years. I would now like to welcome our presenter for today, Paul Bolster, who will present our second webinar titled 13 Years of Online MBA, Lessons Learned. Paul is a professor of finance at the Northeastern University at the faculty and a faculty director for online MBA. Some of his research works have been presented at the prestigious places like the White House and the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, as well as publishing in a well-known journals. His presentation today will shed lights on basic designs element of online program, course design, content, instruction, assessment, and feedback, critical areas of attention, and best practice advice. Lastly, a quick run over the instructions as usual. I would request everyone to turn off their cameras and mics. You can turn them on back as needed in the Q&A session at the end of this presentation. Please do not forget to fill a short survey that you can find in the chat box. Thank you, and over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much. Could you designate me as a presenter?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you for the very kind introduction, Mohammed. I appreciate.
Paul,
yes.
Paul, if you kindly minimize that small window on the right lower corner.
I'm just saying.
Yes.
There we go.
Thank
Okay. Very good. Thank you for that. So what I would like to talk about today is you might want to think of me as a time traveler coming from the future, and I am coming from a period of time where we went through a lot of the same discussions and problem-solving sessions that you are going through now, but we did it approximately 13 years ago. And so what I'm hoping to do is to impart upon you a little bit of what we've learned over this period of time, and also answer just some of the general questions that you might have about some of the most basic concerns about moving to an online platform. So here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to talk a little bit about Northeastern's online MBA program, just to give you a history so you understand where we're coming from. And then I want to talk about the major decisions. Now, Jacob talked about some of these in his session on Tuesday morning, and I just wanted to talk about them from our perspective at the DeMoore McKim School of Business at Northeastern. And then after that, I would like to just move into what have we learned from this? What do we do right? What do we do wrong? How do we improve the program over time? What are some of the problems that we're still wrestling with? And then some final wrap-up thoughts. Here's the important part that I wanted to start with is the transition to online teaching is very uncomfortable, and that's even if it's planned. Obviously, for us, for Northeastern, we chose to get into the online MBA space very early on. You're doing something very different right now. You're jumping into online education because there really is no viable alternative at this particular point. But if if it's comforting, and it probably isn't comforting, but I just want to let you know that it was very uncomfortable for us as well. So discomfort is normal at this juncture. So for us, here's what we're doing. We're back in 2005, we began discussions to launch an online MBA program, and faculty were very resistant to this. They thought that this was a what I would call a down market approach to graduate education. This was being done in the United States by large for-profit universities such as the University of Phoenix. There were a few regional universities who had major online programs, including MBAs at that point in time, but very, very few were accredited. So it took us a while, but by the spring of 2006, our faculty agreed to go forward with an online MBA program. But the agreement required us at that time to essentially take our curriculum from our part-time MBA program and port that onto our online platform. Now, this allowed us to gain the faculty support we needed to move forward. But as I'll mention later, it caused problems. It restricted us in some material ways. By fall of 2006, we began teaching courses. The online MBA was indeed launched. And one of the good things about this is that we were one of the very first accredited online MBA programs in the United States. So it became quite popular. And at that point in time, we used what I'm referring to as a just-in-time system for developing courses. So we were literally rolling out courses to meet student demand one term at a time. So it was pretty exciting to be involved in the program at that particular juncture. Several years later, our enrollments peaked. We had over 600 students taking class during the fall term of 2012. We actually had over 1,000 students overall enrolled in the program. Some of them didn't take classes in that particular fall term, but the program was quite large at that juncture in time. So 2014, we got another positive boost when the Financial Times ranked us the #1 online MBA program in the United States. So things were going incredibly well for us back then. We had lots of students. We were generating lots of tuition revenue for the university, and our reputation was growing stronger. Fast forward to today, we were one of a small handful of accredited online programs back in when we launched. Now there are over 300 accredited programs in the United States in the MBA space. So there's incredible competition, and a lot of very well-known universities such as Carnegie Mellon University, University of North Carolina, even MIT has gotten into this space, into the online MBA space in the United States. So we have a very different playing field than we did back when we first launched. The program currently has 77 different courses, which is a big number if you ask me, and 58 individual faculty are involved. Since our launch, we've added a small MS Finance program and a very small MS Tax program. So we are, as I mentioned, we had about 800 students in 2012. We're down to about 400 students now. Still a very viable program. We've dropped a little bit in the Financial Times rankings, but we're still #5 in that particular space. So here are 3 big decisions that we made at the launch. The first was a decision to make all of our courses and all of our content asynchronous. Now, Jacob talked a little bit about the difference between synchronous and asynchronous course design in his session on Tuesday. We went entirely with asynchronous. Now, what that means is essentially all of our materials had to be created on a platform that students could complete, as it says here, anywhere and any time. And that actually it's a big advantage to asynchronous. What it means is we're jumping into the ocean of online learning in a very big way. We're trying to make a big splash here. We were actually trying to develop a program with very large enrollments at that point in time because we saw it as a major opportunity for the university and the College of Business. So how do we develop this? Well, faculty develop material that's organized into what we call lessons or learning modules on Blackboard. Those could be discussions, projects, assignments, quizzes. These are all asynchronous. The only synchronous session we have is a 1 hour, what we call a chat session once a week with the faculty member. That is synchronous. It is not required that students be there, but they are required to at least watch a video, a recording of the session. So asynchronous allowed us to get students from anywhere, really anywhere in the United States, and we had a lot of international students as well at that point in time. Scalability, again, online is much more scalable than on the ground, and asynchronous is much more scalable than synchronous. So again, that gave us the opportunity to design classes that were quite substantial. Just to give you an example, our core courses, our required courses in the MBA, could have, in the early days, had as many as 180, even 200 students in them. The students were divided into sections of 20 students each. Each section was assigned an instructor. Think of the instructor like a teaching assistant who would manage more of the day-to-day operations of the course itself. Our third decision was to box the courses into a 5-week period. And this is where we really, one of the major difficulties we had in mirroring our part-time MBA program, the on-ground program, was taking courses that would normally run in a 15-week semester and reconstituting them in a 5-week calendar. And so students only take one course at a time, so that helps somewhat there. But it just made these courses extremely intense, particularly in say finance or accounting, where there is a lot of quantitative material, perhaps a little less discussion content, but nonetheless it worked. And this is something that we've worked on over time, is how can we more effectively design courses within that 5-week time period. So let's just move on to what we've learned. And so I'm hoping that in the remainder of my discussion, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the lessons that we learned, and hopefully some of these may be things you've thought about already. Some of them may be novel. And hopefully they will help you as you think about how to move forward in your online endeavors. So here they are. I mean, you've read the slide already. Don't just mirror your on-ground course. There are advantages to online. I'll talk about these in a little more detail momentarily. For us, that 1 hour of live chat was very important. It helped us to develop a rapport with our students that otherwise we really were dealing with in a very distant manner. It turned out to be a very important contact point, and it was super helpful for them and for retaining students and retaining students' attention throughout the course. We learned the more interactivity, the better. In other words, just putting materials online wasn't enough. We had to create learning modules that required students to do something active. Early assessment is critical. That's how you find out if your students are engaged. And then finally, we needed to share ideas and feedback because we were learning as we were going, particularly in the early years, but we still are. So very quickly, the first point, you can't just mirror your on-ground courses and have a successful online course. It's just a different medium. Now, you may be doing more synchronous work where you're actually having your class sessions on the regular class schedule. And that's great. That's advantageous if you have that touch point. We'll talk about some of the issues you're still going to be wrestling with, and you know what many of those are a little bit later in my talk. But one of the important things is you want to take advantage of the online medium. There are things you can do online that you can't do. One of them is it's portable. You can teach your course from anywhere. Your students can take the course from anywhere. If they miss a synchronous session, they can watch a recording of it later. You can adapt materials. You can change materials very quickly in the online environment. So there are a lot of opportunities for flexibility in online that may be advantageous, even compared to your on-ground structures. The other, as I mentioned, is this 1 hour of online chat was very important for us. It allowed us to, it allowed us to build a rapport with students. And even though it was not required for students to attend these live chats, approximately 50% of the students would show up and still do show up for these 1 hour live chats. When we began, we started using this as an office hour, so to speak. So the professor would just be sitting in a small video box on Blackboard Collaborate, which is Blackboard's sort of video chat meeting construct. And this didn't work very well, first of all, because professors would just be sitting around waiting for students to ask questions. And students were a little hesitant to ask questions because they weren't quite sure how this medium was going to work. Plus, there may be a number of students there, and some of them really didn't want to ask a question in front of the others. So it was very awkward. It didn't work very well. So what we found over time is it worked much better as if we use this as you might use a synchronous session, a class session, to have some content and or a planned discussion topic that we announce in advance. And so students would come with a little preparation, would come knowing what to expect. And there could be some Q&A at the beginning or the end, or even during the 1 hour session, but at least it had more structure. And these are much better attended, and they're much more well received by students, and faculty are also much more comfortable with this approach. Interaction. Everything we've found out suggests that students like material that forces them to do something. In other words, it's not just reading, it's not just clicking a couple of links to look at some external material, such as lecture notes. The lecture notes are there, but we have to go beyond that. They like to do analysis and make decisions. They like videos, and this is a piece of advice. Students have told me this over and over again, that if you record a 1 hour session, I'm not going to watch the whole thing at once. In fact, if I'm going to watch it and I have the opportunity to speed up the video to double speed, I'm going to do that. So I've gotten some good feedback from students, all of us have in the program here, to make our videos. So if we add additional video content, which most of us do, keep those videos short. So if there's some small topic you'd just like to highlight in your course, make a 5-minute video just to highlight that point, and leave it at that. And so after a while, you may have a little library of these 5-minute videos that you can move into your courses as necessary, or you can improve upon as time goes on. Synchronous lecture. This is also problematic, or at least it's questionable. How do you get students to respond? And we'll talk about this again momentarily. One last thing, we have added a synchronous residency for students at the beginning and the end of their studies, and these are very popular. So this is a good thing to know. Second point here on the slide: early assessment is critical. In other words, even when students are dialed into your class sessions on Teams, some will have their cameras turned on, some will not. How do you know if they're engaging? How do you know if they're getting it? So for example, having a low impact assessment early on in the course, just to see if students are willing to interact and on what level, might be useful as well, just about engaging those students at this particular early time in the course. If you wait until the course is half over, and if you wait until, say, you have a midterm examination, it may be too late for some students. And finally, share ideas and feedback. This is important. We need to share our successes and failures. So you need to build some kind of a learning community, or at least a platform on which faculty can swap ideas about what worked and what didn't work, and where you might need some extra help. And what we found is that this has been super effective for us. Creating the network is the tricky part, but the faculty to faculty discussions that take place are just super valuable. We also get a lot of feedback from students, such as on balancing the workload. And we also, for example, in recent years, our on-ground students have decided they want the opportunity to take electives online. And so now probably 20% of our online enrollments are students that are actually enrolled in our on-ground program. So more about what we've learned. Asynchronous, as it says at the top of the slide, asynchronous modules are the gift that keeps on giving. The more asynchronous material you can develop, and you've got it, you've got some of it. This is what lecture notes are. But also, this is what examples perhaps you've built, if it's a more quantitative class, or if it's a case example that you have for discussion in another kind of a class. These are the kinds of modules, if you can actually develop them in an online format, and this is just giving you a screenshot of one such, a piece of one such module in my investment analysis program. I teach investments on the MBA course, as well as direct the program itself. And this is just, again, introducing a concept that is super important to investment management, to portfolio management. And then, as you can see here, I've got some lecture notes at the top, and then I've got a spreadsheet. This is not rocket science, but it gives students something to poke around with. It gives them a spreadsheet with some basic data on it that can drive home some of these concepts. They can play with this conceptually. And I've also got an audio walkthrough. That's that bar you see at the bottom, so that I walk them through the spreadsheet and just talk about some of the basic features that we can see and we can learn about from just looking at this very basic data for two companies and forming portfolios from just a two-company portfolio. So this is a very powerful thing, the asynchronous module. And once you've designed it, you can keep using it over and over again. You can tweak it, you can update it, you can do a variety of things, but it really gives you some a tremendous asset going forward. Just another quick example of an asynchronous learning activity. This is more of a higher level one. After we had been running the program probably for 6 or 8 years, we decided to encourage faculty to develop cases, essentially interactive cases. So these cases are sort of built like decision trees, if you will. So in this one, in my course, I've got a couple approaching retirement, and they have to make decisions on how to allocate their retirement funds into different investment opportunities. And the student is put in the position of being their advisor. And so essentially what they find is that it's difficult to make this particular couple happy, because they will be second guessing a lot of your recommendations. And then there is a bit of randomness thrown in here, because after you convince them to take a certain strategy, we roll forward 1 year, and there's a little bit of randomization there. So perhaps the market did really well, perhaps it did really poorly, perhaps it was flat. And depending on how it did, they will come back to you again and ask you for additional advice, and they may be unhappy with what has happened in the interim. So it's not just quantitative; it's also very qualitative. How do you handle people in this uncertain environment? Anyway, this is another example of an asynchronous learning activity that, again, I can use from term to term. So what about you? How do you develop interaction in your classroom? Well, you do it through these basic ideas, right? Q&A, discussion, cold calling, presentations. You can do all of that online. There's no reason you can't do that online, particularly in a synchronous session. But the other thing I wanted to point out here is presentations work really well. You can actually, students like developing presentations offline, and then we've done it in several different ways. Some faculty encourage students to work in small groups, and they develop PowerPoint slide presentations, and they do a voiceover for those PowerPoint slide presentations and put them in a repository in the course area, so other students can watch them in an asynchronous manner. Or some others ask students to actually walk through their presentations on a live session. In other words, a recorded session. So the students are actually being watched by other students in a synchronous manner. All of this works really well. Students actually like this format. Collaborative learning. Again, if you can develop exercises or discussions students can collaborate on, this is very helpful, again, in getting engagement and getting interaction. And finally, students can get together virtually. So group work is actually easier for them to organize in a virtual classroom setting, because they've got so many tools. They know a lot more about Zoom and Teams than I do, quite frankly, and so they find this very effortless to actually schedule and hold meetings and share documents and the like. Here's just a quick example of another type of interactive material that we have. This is assessed, but it's just a discussion. Every week in my course and in most courses, there is a discussion where you're asked to make multiple posts. An initial post in this case by day 4 of the 7-day week, and then responses as the week goes on. And we try to pick topics where there's not a cut and dried answer. It's nuanced. There are many issues to resolve, such as in this case looking at the efficacy of short selling, that is trying to make a profit on the decline in the value of securities. Here's an example of one post from that thread from my most recent class, and what I want to tell you here is that the quality of the posts is quite high. People go off into areas that I wouldn't have thought of when I originally posted a particular discussion topic. So students are very creative here, and they do decent research. And I don't know if you noticed, but on my previous slide, the last thing I asked them to do is I said, if you go external, in other words, you're looking for sources, I want to see your sources. In other words, this is not a time to be grabbing other people's ideas and pretending they're your own. It's not necessary. So as you go external to find additional information, this is what you want to report where you got that information from. And so you get this incredible compendium of research on these topics that students can share with each other. Okay, this is one I know that I've heard that a lot of you are wrestling with. It's academic integrity. And so this is tough. Here I've got some general suggestions, and you may have thought of some of these suggestions before. You may have, if you Google how do I reduce cheating online, you'll see some of these same suggestions here. But for starters, I just suggest there are studies that suggest that simply reminding students that there is a code of conduct, and I know there is a code of conduct at your university. I've looked at it, and cheating is specifically mentioned within this code of conduct as a detrimental activity. So it's useful simply to remind students that code of conduct is there, and they're expected to abide by it. You're also signaling them that this is important to you as a professor. This isn't something I'm just saying. This is something that's relevant, and I care about this, and which leads to another issue, which is what are you going to do when you find evidence of cheating? We're talking about how to reduce it here, but there has to be some sense from the student's point of view that if they get caught cheating, there's going to be some consequence, and maybe the consequence is very localized. In other words, you fail them on that particular assignment, you fail them for the course. At Northeastern, we also have what's called the Office of Student Conduct and Conflict Resolution, which if I find a student has acted with respect to has violated academic integrity, plagiarism, cheating on an exam, something like that, I can provide the evidence to this office, and the office will conduct a hearing that I will attend, the student will attend. Often that's done remotely as well. It certainly will be in the next, for the foreseeable future. But there is a consequence, in other words, and this board, in all but a tiny number of cases, will back up the professor, assuming that you've got ample evidence in place. So I encourage my faculty to go this route if they don't feel like they can resolve an issue of blatant cheating on their own. So this is just something I mentioned here. If you can't, it's one thing to say I don't want students to cheat on my exam, but if you're not going to do anything about it, there's a different problem there. Well, how can you get around this issue? One is you shift some exam-based material to project-based, which essentially means that the exam doesn't have to be monitored as closely. What are the other things we're worried about? Collaboration. Okay, if you're giving an exam to a class of students at the same time or within an exam window, then it's clearly, several students could be in the same room at the same time or could be texting each other, swapping answers. It's not a good environment. How can you get around this? These are just some suggestions. These aren't ultimate solutions to the problem, but there are ways to mitigate the issue, such as using multiple exams, more work for you, using more extended or open-ended questions on exams. Again, more work for you to grade these exams, but it's not as easy to essentially mirror someone else's response. Another one that's super important is reduce exam time. It takes time to cheat. It takes time to look up answers. It takes time to collaborate. So if you can reduce the time that the student actually has to spend on the exam, students that are prepared and articulate will be able to execute the exam materials in the given amount of time. Students that really are looking for external sources, they're more likely to run out of time. The exam could be taken in a common window. So in other words, students that take the exam in the morning of a particular day can't pass on information to students who take it in the afternoon. You could take it in a much narrower window than that. And then finally, many online exam platforms will release the solutions, grades and solutions to students immediately upon completion of the exam. That's a bit problematic if everybody's not taking the exam at the same time, because now correct and incorrect solutions are out there. So don't release solutions until all exams are taken. Now, these may all sound obvious to you. Finally, I know a number of faculty are saying, well, how do I know that students aren't using Google to search or using their notes or textbooks to look up material to answer questions on the exam? Quick side note here. A number of faculty, when we first launched our program, we relied entirely on the code of conduct, the honor code. We had no way of determining where students were taking exams, who they were taking exams with, what materials they were using to resource during their exam periods. A number of professors would simply say, well, we've got this code of conduct. I'm assuming students are following it. I'm just putting a note in my exam instructions that say this exam is closed books. You can't have any other external resources. Okay, there's a problem with that. At least I saw a problem with that, and that is that the students who cheat suddenly may have an advantage on students who are following the rules to the letter. So another alternative here is to just allow use of unauthorized materials. Again, this makes it a little more difficult for you to design an exam and to grade it, but it will mitigate the issues of collaboration and cheating. And again, reduce exam time. So students can't spend a half an hour searching on Google for an answer to a particular question. They really need to know the material before they open the exam session. This is a tough one. Who's taking the exam? This was one we wrestled with a lot, and this was really, faculty became more concerned about this than about the other issues with respect to academic integrity. They really want to know, well, how can I validate that the student who's submitting this exam is really that student? This is hard to do without some kind of online service. It really is difficult. Or maybe you have, maybe Jacob has some suggestions that he can toss out there in the Q&A period. One we found, or one we looked at, we are not using this, is there are keystroke verification programs. So at the beginning of the exam session, the student will type a couple of phrases, and the way that they manipulate the keyboard is like a fingerprint. And so the keystroke verification program will examine their sort of the way they keystroke at various times throughout the exam session, and will score the exam in terms of authentication that way. There are more advanced and expensive solutions. For example, we in the online MBA have switched to ProctorU a number of years ago now. I think we've been using ProctorU for about 6 years now. ProctorU is a service where there's an actual person who's watching students take their exams. When we first introduced this, many students found this a tremendous violation of their privacy. But after an introductory period, students have gotten used to this, and it works pretty well for us now. Proctors will flag issue. They will actually talk to a student if they see some inappropriate activity during an exam session. If the student doesn't respond to the proctor will make a note of this. So it's a fairly robust proctoring service, but again, it's also very expensive and requires some bandwidth in terms of the student to maintain that video link up throughout the period of the exam. Jacob mentioned another tool that we have on campus, Respondus Monitor, which does very much the same thing as ProctorU, except that it's not a person watching you. It's an artificial intelligence algorithm that's watching you and trying to determine whether you're doing something unusual, like looking off screen on a regular basis, or talking to somebody else during the course of the exam period. So it's a way of evaluating your exam environment and your you while you're taking the exam in a remote manner without having a person behind the camera. And also Respondus and ProctorU and other services have authentication services. ProctorU actually will, among other things, will ask a student to hold up a government-issued photo ID prior to the exam session, and the proctor can compare that to a photograph of the student, and I, as a faculty member, can actually see those photographs and some videos of the exam session if necessary. Final thoughts here. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'll just mention this again. The transition to online is uncomfortable. Even if it's planned, in your case, it wasn't planned, so it's going to be very, very uncomfortable. However, and this is important, any effort you can make now to learn more about Teams or your college learning management system, such as Blackboard, Canvas, or Moodle, which I believe all are on campus in different colleges, this will have a big payoff. So in other words, any investment you can make now in getting a little bit more facility with these tools is really going to pay off down the road. Additionally, any asynchronous modules you can develop now, and again, you have most of them, or you have them in some form or another because you use them during your on-ground classes. Now you need to develop them as standalone modules that you can plug in and provide access to them for your students. Again, these modules, you can use them over and over again. You can update them, you can tweak them as necessary over time. Meet and talk about your successes and failures. Don't hold these in. Just don't assume that you're a silo unto yourself. It's super important to develop some kind of a learning community and some kind of a way of having these conversations. And once you move to online learning, it's really unlikely you're ever going to go all the way back, because what you're going to find is that some of the features of online learning really work pretty effectively. And while, believe me, I miss the opportunity of being in front of a class of students. It was so satisfying. It's so you can read their faces. You can you can turn and very quickly sort of change the pattern of your discussion based on one student comment. There are so many things you can do. There's such a luxury to be in front of a live classroom. Unfortunately, very few of us have that luxury anymore. So once we develop a lot of these materials and once we feel some facility with online learning, a lot of those tools and features are going to be useful for us once we do get back into the classroom. Last slide. So just to recap our experience at the DeMoore McKim School of Business, we've had a very positive experience with online learning at the graduate level, particularly with the MBA program. We still have a highly ranked program, even though many of our early critics thought that this would cheapen our ability to attract new students and to raise our academic profile. It has not. Our enrollments are still robust. Another thing to remember, and we learned this as time went on, is that online is not on ground using Zoom. There are similar course design principles, but we can't just mirror our on-ground courses and into our online platforms. Uh, as I mentioned before, going online is uncomfortable, but faculty have grown comfortable online. It just takes time to get to that point. Last but not least, students like it. Students rate their experience positively. They give us positive feedback, and when they give us negative feedback, usually they have a suggestion on how to make it less negative. And again, as I mentioned, some of our on-ground students have trickled into the online program because they find this a very useful opportunity to take some additional courses. So that is the extent of my presentation. Shall we open it up to questions?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. There is an echo, Paul.
Paul, exit the share.
Yes.
Okay. Now, is there a Dr. Allah?
Paul, click on X to exit the sharing.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. The problem that remains is examination. I still did not have the right answer to perform exam and grade students.
Paul, you should exit the share. Otherwise, we hear an echo. So
Okay,
exit the
sorry.
share.
What do I need to do? Oh, end the share. Sorry.
Yeah, exit the share. Click on X.
Especially when there is
Perfect.
Sorry.
Perfect.
So this is a difficult problem to solve on your own.
Am I still on?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
Yes, that's the problem. The problem is with the examination. We will be facing problems with the students who will object, will always object the grade that you give them. They will give any excuse to tell you that this is not the right grade to give. So I think the problem is how to perform examination online. Maybe the right solution is to do it on ground. And this is what has been discussed at the level of the university. Thank you.
Sure. If you have that option, certainly that would be the first best option. If you could actually bring students into campus or into a testing facility, that certainly is the best option that you would have. Other than that, there are, and you know this already, there are you have the opportunity to create exams within Microsoft Teams or some of the other LMS platforms that you have throughout the campus. These will, to some extent, mitigate some of those issues, but I agree with you that they won't mitigate it completely. Bringing students to campus, if you can do that, is a good solution, but I hope that's feasible.
You mean when it is normal? I mean, that's the normal case. It's better to have the exams on the ground. But I mean, considering what we're going on right now, it's better to use, if it's possible, use some online things.
Sure.
Okay. Dr. Sharifa?
Yes, thank you, Professor Bolster and Mr. Craig, for the 2 days of informative sessions. They've been quite enlightening. I have a comment and then I have two questions. With respect to online teaching, reducing the time I don't think is a good option for our students because our students have a language barrier. Most of them are non-native speakers, and reducing the time is really going to challenge them in translating from English to Arabic because our exams are standardized in English. So I'm looking for probably something else. The bigger picture for me is this. We are trying to adapt on the fly in the middle of an existing course. It's not like I'm starting with a fresh batch of students that I can try to get them slowly to go online with me. We are stopping traditional in the middle and continuing online. So I need some tools to help me adapt on the fly, whether it's getting myself able to be familiar with talking into the abyss because not everybody has their camera on, or encouraging students to look at the asynchronous material, because as you know, when we look at Blackboard usage statistics, I can tell who's been in, how long they've been on, and that sort of thing. So really a bigger picture with some short-term tools for right now in the current semester. Thank you.
Thank you.
A couple of comments. One is, and I don't think you do, but I don't strive for perfection here. I mean, this is going to be a very messy semester, and it's unreasonable to expect to have clean solutions to all of the issues that you've just raised. And I say that I'm commiserating with you as much as anything, I think, because I think this is an incredibly difficult problem to wrestle with. And it's one that you're never going to be able to completely solve, at least not in the current semester. This is just going to require some reaction on your part and the part of the students to do the best you can. So that's one sort of high level point that I'd like to make there. So if things aren't, if you can make some adjustments, build some asymmetric materials, do some testing, even though the testing environment isn't perfect, you may have to accept that as the way things are going to be for this particular semester, and hopefully being able to improve along those dimensions going forward. In terms of getting students to engage online, again, if you can do some of the same things, talking into the abyss, I get that part too. I'm grateful I'm not doing that right now. I can see some of you, and I can hear you, your questions and your comments. I appreciate that, but it's hard. That's a difficult thing to adjust to. And all I can suggest there is to try to use some of the same techniques you would use in the classroom, where you ask a rhetorical question and see if you can get. And I don't know if your classes are like mine. There would often be a minority of students who would be eager to provide me with the answer to that rhetorical question, or who would be leading a discussion. And then the trick was to get more involvement, more broad involvement within the classroom. And this is something that will feel particularly awkward, I think, in the online environment, particularly if your students don't have cameras on. I know you can encourage them to have cameras on, but they, my understanding is that you're still not going to get a very high compliance, even if that soft request. But you need to try to reach out and see if these students are connecting, if they're following along here.
I agree. The cameras thing, I've had a 0 response rate. The only way that I am even checking that there's bodies in the room is I'll say, raise your hand if you can hear me, or is this true or false, and give me an agree or disagree. That's how I check. And then if somebody doesn't change their status is where I cold call them and say, is everything okay? But that kind of takes away from my time of getting to material. Like what you said, it's easier when I can scan the room and look at the faces. Now it's a little bit more of a challenge, and time within the current semester is of the essence. So maybe paring down things for this semester, maybe.
That's one solution. That's one possibility, is paring down things and picking your targets. With the material you have left to cover, what are the most important things? We had that same issue again when we took 15-week courses and crushed them into a 5-week period of time. We thought that would be easy because students were taking only one course at a time, but we found, as perhaps you're finding, clock time was important to the learning process. So we had to make our online courses a little more spare than their on-ground counterparts.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Bari?
Hello.
Yeah. Yes. Hi. So thank you for the presentation. I just want to flag something to all of us faculty that we might be underestimating, actually. Bob, Paul, sorry, you you talk from a position where you've had years to build up capacity with students and faculty, and you're dealing with graduate students. For us, we have a cultural issue that we're dealing with 18-year-olds who have never used computers because they have smartphones. They can do everything on smartphones. So when it comes to testing, I honestly think we're being overly ambitious that at least in this semester we can do any kind of testing with any even minimal level of integrity. So if we're forced to do that, and I don't believe we are forced to do that. I mean, the country's open now, malls are full. But if we're forced to do that, I, for one, I'm foregoing that. I'm switching to something else. And so I want to go back to the issue of smartphones and accessibility. Not all platforms are friendly to smartphones. I'm sitting in my home now, actually talking from the kitchen because our homes are full of concrete. And so we have issues with connectivity with a lot of students. We don't know what student backgrounds, what goes on in their homes that they can create the conditions for taking a test. So honestly, I mean, Dr. Zainal, if you take a poll now of the attendees, I'd be surprised if you find 5% who think doing testing online is feasible, actually. Thank you.
Thank you. So,
just a quick comment to that. You're making a very strong case for doing something other than exams, for switching to maybe a project-based or some other. Would this work? What if you had a and I don't know, maybe this is too complicated too. I wonder if you went to a project-based final exam substitute and asked students to record a 3-minute video to go with that project submission that they could record on their smartphones. I don't know whether that would be feasible for them or for you, but just to toss out another alternative that might be a little more than just a flat project.
Well, that might be feasible, except that the university now is getting in our way by banning you students from using cameras, at least as it stands.
No.
Not anymore. That was the case last week.
I'll explain it later on.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And so again, I just think that the smartphone things. I think we underestimate this new generation and how many of them really have never had to have a laptop or a computer at their houses because everything is available on their phones. And so I'm just afraid that we would run into problems with compatibility between platforms and the devices themselves that do not lend themselves to be easily used on a smartphone.
Thank you.
That's a very real problem, and I don't have an obvious solution for you at this point in time, but it's certainly the kind of a problem you want to recognize up front.
Dr. Sindis Al-Ajil?
Yes, hi, good evening. It's evening here, but I can't tell from the wallpaper. It's so lovely, but is it evening? I don't think so.
It's the middle of the morning right now. It's very nice.
Perfect start of the day. I hope it's a good one. Thank you very much, Dr. Bolster and Dr. Zainal. Again, I have two questions actually. Were you at Damore McKim given? How did you decide which platform to go with among Canvas, Blackboard, and all the the abundance of LMS and semi-LMS platforms? How did you decide at which one to use? Were you obliged to go with a couple rather than given a choice for which platform you would like to use? Are faculty given a choice in the matter how to use and which platforms to employ? That's my first question. The second one is your institution had to pay as an institution for Respondus to be used, right? For all of those services. As an institution, individual faculty members cannot create their own subscriptions, correct?
I believe that's correct. In other words, Jacob may be able to give us the more specifics on this, but my understanding is we have a university-wide license to use Respondus. Jacob, could you talk a little bit about this particular point?
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. Yeah, so we do have university licenses for our tools. Sometimes we have programmatic licenses. So like Paul had mentioned, ProctorU, that's a programmatic license. So I design all of the undergraduate online courses at DeMoore McKim, and we do not have a license for ProctorU in that situation. That's a programmatic license. But yes, individual faculty, they could absolutely they could request, for a service. Like we had some faculty who had Zoom before we had a university license, but in most cases, it is university license because that's all that my group supports. And as far as the Blackboard and Canvas question, so I served on the university committee that made the decision to move from Blackboard to Canvas. So we had Blackboard for a while, and we left it up to faculty responses. So that committee was created up of stakeholders from each of the colleges. Northeastern has 9 of them, and we decided based on faculty feedback and student feedback as we piloted both a new version of Blackboard and Canvas. And the feedback we got from faculty, really the first round of feedback we got on Canvas, 100% positive faculty feedback, which we don't get 100% positive feedback on anything. Like it's, if it's really good, it's 80, 90%. So that's a little bit about the decision, but we are all or nothing. So the whole university is transitioning from Blackboard to Canvas. The LMS decision is not left up to individual faculty or programs.
Thank you. Thank you, Jacob. Dr. Akram?
Good evening to everyone. I would like to thank Dr. designL for organizing such a fruitful meeting, really, in 2 successive days. And I would like to thank the speaker, Dr. Paul, as well as Dr. Jacob. And actually, it's not a question, it's really we need more of these discussions because this system is new for all our colleagues. And really, I want to share my experience. I don't know whether you agree with me or not with my other colleagues. I found that sending assignment and quizzes to the students and do a mixture of exams like MCQ, shuffling the questions, and assignment with short essays or long essays. And I found that there is a variation in the grades. Despite they have the assignment for 2 days, the lowest mark I have is 4 out of 10, and the highest mark was 9 out of 10. So assignment with short essays or long essays will judge really a good from bad or average student. So I think assignment with short essays, most of the teachers, maybe they will find it's a time consuming, but at least with using such a system, it would enable us to differentiate between really good or standard or below standard students. I think, yes, our major concern is examination, but I think you can play with the system and get everyone his rights. I don't know whether you can agree with me or not. I mean, I found really a mixture of questions and putting short essays, especially I'm talking from a background of a clinician coming from Health Sciences Center. So we need to put a lot of images and ask a lot of questions about the images. So I think it's very hard. I can agree with you that cheating could happen, but if you send a picture with certain diseases and you need the student to write the symptoms and to write the scenario and the treatment, even if they can open the book, I'm talking from medical background faculty. I think, I don't know whether this will apply to other faculties in Kuwait University or internationally. I will leave the microphone to you. Thank you.
Thank you. That actually was my own question. I mean, can we still apply your recommendation on different areas like engineering, medicine, science?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But it's certainly going to be more difficult applying these suggestions in some areas than others. Certainly, like when I look at engineering is a great example. There are very specific things that students need to know to move on to the next level, and so it's hard to nuance some of those some of those evaluations. But I guess the thing that you mentioned that at the beginning of your comment that I thought was very important is to maintain this dialogue among your colleagues at this particular juncture. And I know all of this is time consuming, all of this is stressful, but to the extent that you can, when you come up with something that you think is working for you, or something that has worked for you, or a failure, something that didn't work at all, if you can find a platform to share, to engender discussion with colleagues, not only in your college, but perhaps colleagues in other colleges that may look at the problem somewhat differently. I think that would be a fruitful exercise.
Yeah, the last thing I just want to remember, still you have this coffee shop close to your Northeastern University called Tati. It's a very nice coffee shop.
Oh, yes. Oh, thank you very much. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Hana?
Well, thank you for this seminar by itself. It's a great opportunity, actually, and I'd like to thank Dr. Zainal for arranging the whole thing in a couple of days. Actually, my concern was the same as they have done. Dr. Akbar, he just raised it, but my concern is, what about the lab sessions for students, either in the information system or in the like the chemistry, biochemistry? Those people, they need experiments. Besides, if we're gonna go to the level of the MBA professors, usually we ask in the projects or the thesis data collection. So how far it's gonna be? There will be the integrity part of the students and the data collection areas, the fields they are using. So how far it's gonna be liable information? Thank you.
If I understand your question correctly, you're asking about well, things are different in the hard sciences or in the information sciences than they are in perhaps the in business administration, and I would totally agree with that. I don't have a good answer for you in terms of how do we do lab work in chemistry online. I'm at a total loss as to what to recommend in that respect. So I think there are going to be very different challenges from different departments, different colleges in terms of moving to online. And again, all I can suggest is at this point is that you communicate with one another and try to problem solve these more organically with a group. But your question and your concern is a very real one, and I don't have a very specific answer for you at this juncture, other than to encourage you to continue dialoguing.
Thank you. Dr. Hamid, who is the MBA head. Dr. Hamid.
Actually, I'm not going to. Hello, Paul, and hello, Jacob. Thank you for the presentation for yesterday and today. Actually, my question has nothing to do with MBA. It's a general question. Since you have 12 years of experience, and I'm sure other university has online experience, did you question the educational process in itself before you utilize any of the current technology? There are tons of research projects that are dealing with human augmentation, AI, machine learning, to like intelligent tutoring system, computer assisted instruction that would help tremendously. With the current pandemic, we're being reactive rather than proactive. We are reacting. When in fact, you have experience like 12 years, but have you considered to redefine this conventional approach to education in itself? rather than using the tool to present the courses online. And this is my area of interest. I was just asking because to get a feeling of whether you've considered this in your, because people are complaining, paying for online, tremendous amount of fees, I mean, in the US. And then for just delivering the content online, but being conventional. What's the added value there? You know, is there an added value? Considering the tremendous technology improvement, I'm not talking about teamwork. When I look at teamwork, it looks like a mechanical tool to me. So I have to present the content in the old way. There's nothing new about it. It's just only online. I know I'm deviating from the main themes, but I thought I should ask my question or my concern. I'm really happy to hear you and Jacob.
So let me take a shot at that. That's a very articulate question and a very important one. What I was thinking of as you were describing this issue was that, wow, we've been doing this for 13 years, but we have a long way to go, quite frankly. When I look at the state of our materials in our online program, they're good, and some of them are very good, but they're still not particularly sophisticated in the ways that you are describing in terms of using AI and using some other more advanced systems to promote and validate the learning process. We are just not at that level. But I think that's I appreciate being reminded of the fact that we have a long way to go at this juncture as well. The other thing I guess I would say is how, and this amazes me too, how are we still able to charge the same tuition for our online MBA program as we do for the on-ground service, but when clearly it's less expensive to deliver, and students in many cases are arguing that it's not the same product. And I think the answer to that is that students really prize, from the student point of view, students really prize the flexibility and the mobility associated with a totally online learning platform. They're willing to pay that premium amount for access to the materials in order to pursue their degree from anywhere at any time. That's something that is actually valuable in the marketplace. Now, that still doesn't address your initial concern or question about how can we validate the learning that's going on here. And I think I would agree with you that a lot of what we're doing in these online courses, even though they look more sophisticated and they do encourage more interaction, there's certainly more we could do. There are more sophisticated things we could do to capture the effectiveness of these materials. We really feel like we've closed the gap between learning outcomes in our on-ground courses, and we do evaluate learning outcomes, both online and on the ground. And we, at this point in time, we're seeing fairly similar statistics from both pools of students. So we feel at least encouraged that we're we're meeting a similar benchmark, if not exactly the same one.
But yes, the reason that I raised this important issue is, to me, and I'm sure I'm an educator, to me, this is a defining moment in the history of mankind. One of them, we have seen lots of them during this history of mankind, but we are not in a pandemic.
Humankind, Dr. Hamid, humankind, not the mankind.
Yes, humankind. We are really, and education is fundamental. And to be honest with you, I don't see any of the universities really taking any initiative. I mean, we're looking at US prominent, including your organization, to provide us with some guidance, not like a CDC version, but really doable guidance so that we can enhance and redefine our educational process and institution as well. So, but I don't see that. I mean, I see we're going to use team to do a certain thing, but this is just very temporary and very limited capacity. And we have a much bigger task to redefine, actually, our way of life. And education is a component of it. And I don't see that, to be honest with you, in the state.
Thank you. Okay, I think we have one more question. We'll make it the last one. Dr. Mona?
Yes, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much, Dr. Paul and Dr. Mohammed, for your great effort. Honestly, it's really great to attend to these workshops or seminars. Well, my first concern, I'm not worried about cheating in the exams, because I believe our students are adults and they know their rights and their duties. But what I'm really worried about is the broadband connection in Kuwait in general, and the access to the internet and the classes, and especially the exams. I would like you to elaborate more about the testing into these online testing that I've seen actually on Coursera, because I removed my hat as a faculty member and I took one of the classes that I was interested in, and I was really amazed by each module and how it was very specific in terms of how much time I have to spend in each one of them. And even the quiz, it has to take from me, for example, 10 minutes. And once you go through the whole process, it was honestly one of the most interesting experience I ever had. The knowledge was from University of Hong Kong with one of the best prominent professors in the world. The knowledge we got. So my philosophy in teaching in general is just we have to produce and transmit. Now exams, it's a byproduct of what we are doing. What we have to do today is just to be innovative as much as we can during this pandemic to help our schools to be a better school, to distinguish ourselves from all other universities. So I would like you to elaborate about these exams, because you even have trials. You take one time, I didn't do well, I didn't pass it, then I had to take it again with different questions. So it was an amazing thing, actually. The other thing, we can look also at Harvard University. As you know, a few weeks ago, they moved completely 40% on campus and 60% online. And they assured the parents of the students and the students the quality of the education will not be compromised. So when I see a university as Harvard that move forward with such a decision, I do believe they do have a lot to learn from. Of course, the 40% who attends the campus is only for the FIGLI, which is the first generation low income students only, and the 60% will be online. And remember, Harvard University have a medical school, engineering school, and other schools. So if they can do it, I think that there is something for us to do. It's just a matter of time, and maybe it will take a little bit more time from us as a beginners into this field to just, accelerate CBA. And with Dr. Mohammed Zainal, I will just thank you so much for all what you are doing. I honestly, I don't think anybody can, race with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Again, that was a very good overall observation about some of the overall problem that we're facing here. It's not just about going online. It's about the quality of the education that we're able to deliver in the online environment, and how long do we have to stay there, and what can we do essentially as different types of educators to become more effective in these environments. I'm not sure I'm answering your question here really. If I don't know if Professor Zainal, whether you can restate the question again in more succinct terms. So,
well, let us ask her again to.
Sure.
Oh yes, sure. Yeah.
Yes.
My question is that when you had your programs or your classes, for example, then the way you put the exams there, the students can open the book, right? They have more than one trial to take the exams. What I'm trying to say is we should not worry so much about the cheating as much as how much he can learn from these subjects. But I don't know how your university and your experience is with that, because this is something available on Coursera. There is Stanford University courses there. There is, I think, MIT, a lot of Asian universities, like top-ranked universities there. So they are all doing that. But I'm not sure your hands-on experience, how is it?
Okay, thank you.
I think last time Jacob said that, I mean, you have to replace it with a trust, put yourself in their shoes, and yeah. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So you raise a good point. First of all, I took a Coursera course several years back and was very impressed. First of all, it's free, which is pretty amazing. And then the rigor of the course. This was a course developed by a professor of finance at New York University, and the quality of the course, the rigor of the course, was super impressive. And there were nearly 1,000 people taking this one course at the same time I was. So I was just amazed. And as you suggest, there were some of the exercises were repeatable. So some of the smaller deliverables or assessment tools media were repeatable. So if you didn't do well the first time, you could take it again. There was a final exam that was not repeatable. It was a one-time only deal, and it was although it was more or less a take-home exam, so you had to. It was more or less case-based, but it had a lot of quantitative elements to it. Anyway, that was an eye-opener for me. Most of the testing that we're doing at this point in our MBA program is at least the high-stakes testing, like midterms and finals, online that we're doing are one-time only deals. And your point is a very valid one. Are we maximizing learning by providing that as an opportunity for students? It's a trade-off. In other words, you may get more learning by allowing students to sort of review their corrected work and make an effort to execute, to learn it better, to get it right the second or third time. And perhaps you can build an assessment tool and a feedback tool that allows them to do that, and then so their final grade is maybe some kind of a weighted average of the scores they've gotten on 3 consecutive iterations of a similar assessment. That's just one possibility. I don't know if Jacob, do you have anything to add here?
I think I would just kind of repeat what I said yesterday. Like, I'm going to trust my students until they give me a reason not to trust them. And so if there are, absolutely, I'm going to do things I can to avoid academic dishonesty. But I tend to have the same philosophy there, is that my focus isn't really on the cheating. My focus is on developing the quality of content and assessments. And yeah, to repeat what Paul said, I do a lot of research on formative assessments, those small little assessments that students can take over and over again in preparation for the summative one that they only get one shot at. And so that's what we recommend in building our classes and making those engaging and interactive as we can.
Well, if I have one thing to second Dr. Muna, is that examinations are byproduct, not the only assessment tool. I mean, but it's the easiest way for us to do is to assess them through the examinations. But I don't know how. So one day, I mean, some guy came like probably 400 or 500 years ago who found this thing to be the only one. I mean, and we got used to it. We can find some other alternatives to assess our students, and it's time to find it right now. We have the flexibility to at least try ourselves, not sticking only to that old-fashioned finals and quizzes or midterms. That's my suggestion, I mean, if I can. Well, at the end, I thank you both. It has been a very good, to me at least, webinar, and we learned a lot from you guys. Thank you again, and I thank everyone that attended this webinar. Hope to see you soon, and that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.